What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the whatever today is, April 9th. I think it's Wednesday, April 9th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 5-game MLB slate tonight. We had 8 games earlier. Hopefully that is going well for you all. Not sure how it's going for me. I think I need the Orioles to do well, which probably means that it's going to go shitty. But hopefully you guys are doing well. A lot of pitching dominated the early games. I know I have a lot of Hunter Brown going. Probably just started. I don't know what time that game started, but 5 games tonight. So smaller slate than usual. From an overview standpoint, usually when you get smaller slates in MLB, that is when negative correlation starts to become a little bit stronger. You are going to kind of be pushed towards some uglier plays because it's just going to be more difficult to find true low ownership in good spots like you can on those 8, 9, 10 game slates. So it does become a little bit more powerful to consider stacking against more popular pitchers, even if those pitchers are pretty good. But going to walk through game by game, as always, talking through what looks best right now. I'll go over the player exposures that I would have if the slate started right now. But again, take those with a grain of salt because, one, they're probably going to change between now and lock. And two, whenever anybody's talking about player exposures that they have, or if you're looking back at a previous slate and looking at other players' player exposures, it's almost always not going to be a bunch of player takes. It's not, I think this player is great and everybody else is wrong. There's a lot of obviously different moving parts to go into choosing the lineups that you want to play, projection, ownership, correlation, all of that stuff. So even if I am getting to a lot of someone, it doesn't necessarily mean I think they're an amazing play individually. It doesn't mean that I think somebody's terrible if I'm not getting to a lot of them. So those are more of just an additional data point, additional talking point. But I think the most important useful things, actionable things for you throughout the show are going to just be going through these projections, talking about what looks good, why it looks good, all of that kind of stuff. And then you can kind of put everything together for yourself. Late start today. I set the 4:30 start time. Usually that's going to just mean that I want to start at like 4:35. And I'm telling myself that I need to be ready by 4:30 because then I'll be ready by 4:35. But we are good to go now. We are still waiting on the Milwaukee lineup, unless that came out in the last couple of minutes. But every other lineup is in, so that's nice for this slate as well. We do have the Coors game with Milwaukee, so Milwaukee is going to be really popular. That lineup does obviously matter a lot. But starting here with the Blue Jays taking on the Red Sox in Boston, Kevin Gausman is on the mound for Toronto. For the Red Sox, we have Tanner Houck. Houck's getting 13% ownership. Kevin Gausman is getting 24%. I'm actually over the field on Gausman and under the field on Tanner Houck right now. You can see here that we do have Gausman projected considerably better. Not great for an $8,500 price tag, but in the context of a 5-game slate where one of the games is in Coors Field, that is a decent projection for Gausman. We have him ahead of Houck, as you can see. Not a great matchup for either pitcher. Both of these offenses are certainly competent. The ballpark is good for offense, as we know, in Fenway. But we only have about a 3.4 strikeout projection on Tanner Houck compared to 5.5 for Gausman. And I've mentioned this on shows before, just talking about our projections. Gausman has, or at least last year, was not as good a strikeout pitcher as he has been in the past. He saw a drop-off as far as his splitter usage goes. But our projections do factor in data that is more recent. Obviously, it's using historical data as well, as any good projection model will. But it is being accounted for that, his stuff has dropped off as well. So it's not a safe spot. The projection isn't great, but I did want to point that out that, this isn't a case of, Kevin Gausman was good at getting strikeouts 5 years ago. So we're still projecting him to be pretty good at getting strikeouts. Even with the drop off we've seen from him recently, we do have this as a pretty reasonable strikeout spot for him. There is obviously a lot of risk as well. You can see we haven't projected to give up like close to a home run here, which is relatively high. But the strikeouts are there. The salary is reasonable. And I think most importantly, too, when you just look at pitching in general on this slate, it's not really good. The highest projected pitcher is Yusei Kikuchi, not to take anything away from him, but any slate where Yusei Kikuchi is the highest projected raw point pitcher, it speaks to the fact that you don't have either a lot of great pitchers on the slate, or you do have good pitchers, but they're in tough strikeout matchups, tough parks, some combination of both. Today, I think it's kind of a combination where you have a few good pitchers on the slate, but it's kind of more your like number 2, number 3, number 4 starters. And then you also don't have the best parks to pitch in. You don't have the best matchups. So all of that even though he only projects for 14 to 15 DraftKings points, Gossman is still one of the higher projected pitchers on the slate. And that's why he's getting 24% ownership. That's why, for me, I'm getting even more than 24% right now, even though it's not going to feel great. Going back to the start of last season, people mentioning the lefties in Boston's lineup. Going back to the start of last season, only a 19% strikeout percentage, 19.6% strikeout percentage against lefties for Gossman, 22% to righties. Lefties had a 197 expected ISO, righties had a 200 expected ISO. And that was the really big change that we saw, was that with Gossman's splitter being less effective last season, he did lose his ability to strike out left-handed hitters at a high clip like he used to. He's always been somebody that has given up power to right-handed hitters, and that didn't really change last year, but he started giving up more power to lefties, started allowing more contact to lefties as well as a result of the drop-off in effectiveness with that splitter that we saw. So hopefully, he does get that back together. He obviously has only made a couple of starts this year. You haven't seen anything good yet, but that is something to keep an eye on with him in general, because he does need that pitch to succeed. It's always been his best pitch ever since Baltimore drafted him in 2012 or whatever year that was. So it will be something to pay attention to. It is a risky spot, but I am getting to him on this particular slate. I do think that you can get to the Red Sox as well, and I am. This is a spot where I think if you're playing multiple lineups, being on both sides of this makes sense, because Gossman is one of the highest projected pitchers on the slate, but it is still a very, very volatile spot for a couple of reasons. One being the park, two being that the Red Sox offense is good, or at least, competent. And then also the fact that Gossman, based on last year at least, does appear to be dropping off. He has had trouble with his best pitch, the pitch that has really gotten him the recent success that he has. Like, if you think about his career, he's always had that good splitter, but you go back to the time in Baltimore, he didn't throw it nearly as often as he should. When he would throw it, he would have success. Then he bounced around, went to Atlanta, went to Cincinnati, didn't have any level of success as a starter with those teams. Lands in San Francisco, they really reinforce that he needs to be throwing his splitter. He starts throwing it a lot, has success there. I think that's where he won the Cy Young. I don't remember. Then, goes to Toronto, continues to have success up until last year. So it is a very, very important pitch for him. And yeah, Larry, I have a little bit of concern about the K rate dip. I've been talking about it for 10 minutes. Jokes aside, yes, concerned about the K rate dip. But the thing to keep in mind is that, like, without that dip in K rate and without Gossman having the tough season last year, he'd be projected for, 16, 17 and a half DraftKings points, something like that here. So factoring that in, he still projects well. But the concern is that it does add to volatility. If you were talking about this a couple of years in the past, what you'd be saying is Gossman gives up power to righties. It's Fenway Park, so that's dangerous. And then you can just bet on Boston talent, and the fact that Gossman's getting ownership makes Boston a good stack. Here, because we do have the more recent data where you have seen him struggle last year, both to get strikeouts and to limit power to both sides of the plate. All of those things are still true. The park being a good place for right-handed power, something that Gossman has always struggled with. The Red Sox having quality hitters, Gossman getting ownership, so negative correlation comes into play. But then you're also saying, oh, and by the way, Gossman's probably not that good anymore either. Like, he's still fine, but he's not the ace Kevin Gossman that he was a couple of years ago. It seems pretty safe to say that at this point, based on what we've seen over the last year or so. So, yeah, all of that, taken into account going into the projections. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I wasn't trying to give you too hard of a time, but I was like in the middle of my, I think, second monologue on Kevin Gossman's drop off. But yeah, it's one of those spots that can be difficult to talk about or write about in content, because there's so much nuance to it, where I can point out a bunch of reasons that I will be really scared of my Kevin Gossman lineups. I can point out a bunch of reasons I think the Red Sox, at pretty low ownership, are a very appealing stack. But then you have to take that step back and say, okay, if I'm scared to play Kevin Gossman, what pitchers am I not scared to play today on this slate? And the answer is absolutely none of them. And then, you have to say, if I am going to jam the Red Sox, am I going to give up Coors Field? Am I going to give up Milwaukee? You're kind of trying to balance all of this stuff. And so that's why you see, if the slate started right now, I would be overweight on both sides of it. I think that there is a very high ceiling on both sides. An $8,500 Gossman on this slate clearly is capable of being the highest scoring raw pitcher. There's only 10 pitchers going. He has the third highest projection. The Red Sox are certainly capable of winning the slate. They're in Fenway Park. They have plenty of power in their lineup. If you look at the implied run totals for teams today, Milwaukee is clearly at the top, right around 6. Other than that, nobody's above 5. Atlanta and Colorado coming in at 5. Boston coming in at 4.5. Like, pretty much all of these offenses, with the exception of Milwaukee, look pretty close to the same in terms of expected run production. Like, the lowest is the Angels at 3.9. And then you factor in that the game's in Fenway. So not only do the Red Sox have a relatively high implied run total, but because of the park, it is likely that those runs are driven by extra base hits, by home runs. So very, very high ceiling, I think, for both sides here. Getting to quite a bit of Jarren Duran. He's getting 11% ownership. I'd have 21% if the slate started right now. Devers getting 11% ownership. I'd have 21% if the slate started right now. Obviously, he's been god-awful to start the season, but you do still have that very long track record of Devers being good. David Hamilton batting 8th, but only 2,600 with MPE. Also a capable base stealer. Curious to see what we have his stolen base projection at here. It will get driven down since he's sitting toward the bottom of the order. Obviously, that limits at bats. It increases the chances of somebody being on base in front of him and preventing him to steal, but still a very high stolen base projection for him, especially for somebody hitting 8th. Basically, what this is telling you is that, if he gets on base with nobody ahead of him, you're just expecting him to go. And at 2,600, that does obviously give you upside. I'm 2x the field on Tristan Casas right now. I'm a little bit over the field on Bregman, who I do like the fact that, he is a right-handed power bat in Fenway against Gossman. That looks good. So I do like getting to the Red Sox here. I am getting to Gossman. I think, like, if I had to choose a side, which is tough to say because for different reasons, but like if I were playing one lineup and you told me I could only play Red Sox bats or I could only play Gossman, I'm not even sure that I would say Gossman. Like, obviously, if I say Red Sox, then again, it means I'm like taking out Milwaukee. But the lack of ownership that Boston's getting, like right now, their highest projected ownership is 11% to Devers, combined with the fact that Gossman's probably going to be rostered by like a quarter of the field. I do think the Red Sox are a very strong tournament stack for a lot of reasons here in your non-Gossman lineups. On the Toronto side, I am getting to them a little bit as well, not as much as Boston. Pretty much in line with the field. Field is getting like 5 to 10% ownership on pretty much every hitter in the Blue Jays lineup. I'm basically in that same ballpark. Ernie Clement showing up 11% for me. That's my highest owned Blue Jay. Vlad, Bichette are both at 10%, Kirk at 8%, and that kind of just goes down from there. Pretty much everybody ranging from like 6 to 11%. That pretty much tells me I expect that I'm using them predominantly in stacks. I doubt that I'm getting to a ton of Toronto one-offs, which is fine with me. If I'm getting some Guerrero one-offs or I'm getting some Bichette one-offs, there's nothing wrong with that. But even though he doesn't project particularly well in this spot and I'm not playing him, Tanner Houck is a pretty solid pitcher. Only a 128 expected ISO allowed to lefties last year, 144 to righties. Not great strikeout stuff. Only a 23% K percentage to righties, 18.7% to lefties. So that is what's kind of limiting his appeal as far as getting into my lineups. Struck out overall 20.6% of hitters with a 3.65 xFIP last year. He's a good enough pitcher at preventing power and preventing runs, though, that I'm not really singling out individual Toronto bats. I think the view here is more, if Tanner Houck is on, none of these guys really look great. But if Tanner Houck doesn't have it, then obviously you would just want as many Blue Jays as you can get into a lineup in Fenway Park. So they are going to be, clumped together, stacked together at a pretty high frequency for me. And I think that does make sense when you just think about, everything that goes into this matchup. Houck specifically, I mentioned I wasn't really getting to. He is getting 13% ownership, which is okay. I mean, it's a 5-game slate, and he's good. I don't love the salary at 7,700. I don't love the matchup. I don't love the ownership. If he were lower owned, I'd certainly be a lot more interested. But he is one of those guys where, like, if you build a lineup and he just fits into it, I think it's fine. Like, I wouldn't be starting over because I land on Tanner Houck. He's just somebody that isn't showing up for me, and I'm not super upset about it. If I turned some of the 44% Gossman into Houck, I wouldn't be upset about that either, given that I don't love Gossman here either. But kind of just like a take it or leave it secondary option, I think, for Tanner Houck. Certainly more interested in Gausman just because of the strikeout upside that I think he still has, even if it's not as high as it used to be. Angels taking on Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay or wherever they're actually playing these games. I think they're still in Tampa Bay, just at a different park. But it is a park upgrade from Tropicana, which isn't saying a whole lot. But we have for the Rays, we have Ryan Pepio. For the Angels, we have Yusei Kikuchi. And I mentioned it before, Kikuchi is our highest projected pitcher. It's not by a wide margin. You can, when you factor in the volatility in baseball, any of these guys are kind of, the same-ish. Like, obviously, a 3-point difference in projection between Kikuchi and Gausman Holmes. Like, it's not the same, but range of outcomes wise, there's not a huge difference here. But Kikuchi does have one of the higher strikeout percentages on the slate, which obviously is good. And it's something that, I've mentioned a million times on shows in the past, but it does provide as much of a floor as you can find in MLB DFS. Like, his floor is still negative. Being able to get strikeouts doesn't give him like a 10-point floor or anything like that, but it provides safety. And a lot of times I think people look at implied run totals and think that is where floor and safety comes from. And to some extent, obviously it does. Like, if you're not giving up runs, great. But you can give up runs, by accident. You can get unlucky, give up 3 runs. And if you're somebody that strikes out 18% of hitters, you're in trouble. If you're somebody like Kikuchi that has struck out 27.5% of hitters since the start of last season, which is the highest mark on this slate, 3.3 xFIP, just a good pitcher that has good strikeout stuff. Even if he has that inning where, he walks a couple guys, maybe he hits somebody, and then a couple bloop singles fall in, and suddenly it's 3-0 Rays. At that point, you're not getting the ceiling game where he goes and gets 35 fantasy points, but he's still plenty capable of going out there and getting 15, 16 fantasy points just because he racks up strikeouts after that at a rate that nobody else on this slate really can, outside of like Joe Ryan, who isn't in a great spot for it. So I think that Kikuchi does look fine. He's getting 36% ownership. He's only 8,300. I'm a little bit over the field at 52%. He would be my highest owned pitcher if the slate started right now. Yeah, good point, Jake. The Rays are now in Tampa and not in St. Petersburg. Ryan Pepio on the other side, getting to him as well. Nice spot. You do have the lowest implied run total on the slate for the Angels, as I mentioned before. 35% ownership coming into a $7,900 Pepio. I'm getting the 42%. That looks good to me. He is a good pitcher. 26% strikeout percentage since the start of last year. 4.04 xFIP. You can see that we have him projected to face basically one less batter than Kikuchi, to go a third of an inning less, but very similar outs projection, very similar total batters face projection, a little bit cheaper salary, a little bit lower fantasy projection. I think these two are very, very similar. I expect to be getting to both of them plenty. I think the field will get to both of them plenty, and I think that they should. Just two of the better strikeout pitchers on the slate. Not a bad matchup for either of them. Offensively, there is merit to going to these stacks for negative correlation, in addition to the fact that they are low owned. I'm not really getting to it right now. My highest owned hitter from this game would be Mike Trout in like 12% of my lineups. Goes without saying that, if you're getting to Mike Trout, that's fine. We have him with the highest fantasy point projection in this game, just ahead of Yandy Diaz. But if you were to decide you wanted to go heavier on this game, I think that the argument would just be the pitchers are getting combined 70% ownership. If one of these offenses goes off, not only is pretty much every hitter in the game sub 10% owned themselves, but you're knocking off a third of the field that rostered that opposing pitcher. Looking at what the pitchers have struggled with going back to last year, only a 144 expected ISO allowed to lefties by Pepio, 27% strikeout percentage, 163 expected ISO to righties, 24% strikeout percentage. So slight reverse splits there for Pepio. It is backed up by a changeup that he's thrown about 30% of the time to left-handed hitters. So not glaring splits, but worth mentioning. Mike Trout, Taylor Ward, Jorge Soler, the guys that have, big right-handed power in this lineup, Logan O'Hoppe. We have pretty solid home run projections on them as a result. So that is worth keeping in mind. For Kikuchi on the other side, as I mentioned, we did see him not only start to really get strikeouts, but really improve as a pitcher overall. 3.3 xFIP last year, but does still give up some power. Doesn't have splits really at all. 27.5% K percentage against righties, 28% to lefties, 166 expected ISO to righties, 167 to lefties. So nothing that you can really single out and target there as far as preferring right-handed bats, preferring, left-handed bats. You're going to prefer right-handed bats just because you expect them long-term to do better against the lefty if everything's equal. But more so, you're just going to want to be looking to whoever the best power bats are on Tampa Bay, which means you're looking at Yandy Diaz, Caminero, Morel. You can get to some Danny Jansen. You don't have Brandon Lau in the lineup from the left side. So that does mean that there is some pinch hit risk as well. You can see it showing up here predominantly for Curtis Mead. So you do want to be careful with him. He's $3,600, batting third. We have him getting pinch hit for a lot. So that's why you don't see a higher projection there, is that it's very likely that once you get into the bullpen, he is coming out of the game. So you do want to be careful with spots like that in MLB in general. If you're using projections that don't account for it enough, that they're just plugging in $3,600 number 3 hitter on a team with a 4.5 implied run total, it's going to give you a higher median projection than it should, because it's going to assume too many at bats. And then you're going to plug stuff into an optimizer and it's just going to spit out that this guy's a great value when he's still an okay value because he's 3,600 batting third. But if this game's relatively competitive, once Kikuchi comes out, he is probably, Curtis Mead that is, probably leaving the game. So keep that in mind. Caballero has some pinch hit risk as well, but not as much as Curtis Mead. So if you were, confused, if you're just kind of looking at the screen and confused why the number 3 hitter is projecting lower than all these guys, this is the big driving factor there. And that is one thing I really like about our projections too. It's not just, here's the name, here's who they play for, here's the projection. You have no idea what is driving that projection. You can see all of it on the screen. And as a reminder, these are publicly available now. You can sign up using the link in the description below for the Run the Sims projections. These are the projections that we have put together. Utical, Nerdy Tenor, Brick75, myself. We put these out at Run the Sims. Really excited about that. It's the first thing that we've launched on our own at Run the Sims that didn't already exist. That in addition to the free golf optimizer that is on the site right now. We have some sims coming behind that aren't ready yet. But if you are playing master stuff, optimizer is free to use on the site as well. MLB projections, not free, but the link is in the description below. I'm really excited about them. So that is one thing I really like. Like, you can use these to bet props as well. Like, you have every market projected here. But I do really like, just from a DFS standpoint, being able to quickly look and be like, okay, why is this projection so low? And then you can very quickly see that it's pinch hit risk. And then you can decide, maybe you don't agree, and you can just manually bump it, say, hey, they're wrong. He's not getting pinch hit for because XYZ reason. Or, you can look and say, oh, okay, that's a legitimate reason. I'm glad that's factored in, whatever. I like being able to just see across the board everything that's going into it. So anyway, not getting to a lot of the offense here. I think if you do, it's fine just because of negative correlation. But pitching is the priority for me. 2 of the highest strikeout pitchers on the slate. Larry said I'm caught up. Adam at 1.25 speed isn't too bad nowadays. Yeah, I think I've gotten a little bit better at talking slower. I don't know. Coffee also is kind of worn off, so it could just be a slow day. Spags at 1.65 is crazy. Philadelphia taking on Atlanta in Atlanta. Relatively high total in this game, around 9.5. Grant Holmes on the mound for the Braves. Taijuan Walker going for the Phillies. Holmes projects well for us. Walker, not so much. 10 fantasy point projection for Walker. So in that same ballpark as Tanner Houck. I do think that Tanner Houck is the better pitcher in terms of talent level. But projections pretty much the same. Grant Holmes is the one that I would prefer to get to, though. He is only $6,500, not projected to go super deep into this game. We have him projected just shy of 5 innings here, facing like 20 total batters. So that is working against him, but still projected for like a little over 5 strikeouts here. And he's cheap, which, also stands out. As a starter last season, he struck out 26.7% of hitters, 3.63 xFIP, very solid there as well. So from a talent standpoint, he looks good. The price looks good. The matchup is not ideal, but that's going to just be a theme throughout this slate. There's no great spots. Like, the Angels are the best spot, I think. But you have Philadelphia playing, you have Atlanta playing, you have Boston, Toronto, you have a game in Coors Field, and then you have a game in Kauffman between the Twins and the Royals. So there's no real matchup that I think checks every box on this slate where the pitcher's good, The matchup's good. The park is good. So willing to get to Holmes here. Einsteinium said Walker over Holmes. I mean, your general process, I know this, is to just grab the shittiest pitcher you can. So I do believe that you think Walker is a better play than Holmes. I have seen the lineups that you play. Jokes aside, Holmes showing up 36% for me, Walker showing up 3%, Fields at 23% ownership to Holmes, Walker getting 3%. So I'm not really doing anything too crazy there. Offensively, I am getting to the Braves a little bit. Michael Harris in particular is jumping up. Been hitting the ball hard to start the season, which obviously you like to see, making quality contact, getting 16% ownership, only $3,800, leading off, has the platoon advantage against Walker, has stolen base upside. All of that looks really good, makes him look like a good value. We actually have him as the highest projected player in this game, which I'm not going to argue with it. I think that our model is good. It is crazy. It does stand out that Michael Harris is projected ahead of like all the good hitters in this game. Not saying he's not a good hitter, but it does reinforce why he's showing up so much for me, why I think he's such a good value here at 3,800. You can see a reasonable stolen base projection. You can see, a solid home run projection here. As I mentioned, you've been getting a lot of quality contact from him to start the season as well. Going back to the start of last season, wrong pitcher. 231 expected ISO allowed to left-handed hitters by Taijuan Walker, only a 15.5% strikeout percentage, 277 expected ISO allowed to righties. Like, you can get to any of these Braves bats, I think, and they're going to look pretty good, but everything's just setting up pretty well for Michael Harris here. Matt Olson showing up 17% of the time for me, Ozzie Albies 14%, Marcell Ozuna 12%. Then it drops off a little bit, Riley at 9%, Murphy at 8%, and nobody else really showing up too much. So in the aggregate, I think the field is pretty even with me, maybe a little bit higher even. But individually, I'm a little bit higher on Harris in particular and Matt Olson, who also has been hitting the ball very well to start the season. So yeah, like Atlanta, I think is just like an obviously good stack. Walker's one of the weakest pitchers on the slate from a talent standpoint. The park is fine. The offense has a ton of talent. I think they're a good stack. You're not going to sneak anything by anybody. They're going to be one of the most popular stacks on the slate. So you will have to find ways to differentiate elsewhere, which can be kind of tough on a slate like this, where pitching, it's tough to get like sneaky at pitcher because there's not good pitching drawing people away from like the mediocre options. The mediocre options are the ones that everybody's going to play. In this case, if you're talking about Atlanta, you can't go to 3% owned Taijuan Walker to be different because that would make no sense. So it can be, tough here to make Atlanta full Atlanta stacks that are really different somewhere. I think the ways that I would probably want to approach it, just thinking through it, would be either to like if you're going to 5-man stack Atlanta, I think that's a spot where maybe you go to like an Angels mini stack or a Rays mini stack or a Red Sox mini stack. So you are getting some leverage against popular pitching. And, obviously those hitters are going to have like 5 to 10% ownership. They're not unowned, but you're at least knocking off a quarter to a third of the field if your mini stack really does well. Another way you can handle it is and it looks like the way that I'm handling it more, to single out a couple of bats from Atlanta and grab Harris Olson, grab Harris Albies, Harris Ozuna, whatever, as 2-mans. Hope that, you get 2 or 3 home runs combined from your 2-man, but that overall the Braves kind of don't do a whole lot. And even though those players have ownership, a lot of their ownership will be tied up with other Atlanta bats. So like, if you grab Harris, you grab Olson, let's say Olson homers twice, Harris homers once, and that's all the scoring for Atlanta, you're still different because such a high percentage of lineups that have Harris plus Olson are also going to have Riley or Ozuna or Murphy or some combination of all of them. So you are still going to be kind of different in that way. So those are the 2 ways that I think I would most want to approach Atlanta here, given that they are in an obviously good spot. Michael Henry said, is Holmes getting more ownership than Pepio on FanDuel? On FanDuel, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at any FanDuel ownership or anything. From a projection standpoint, he doesn't project as well on FanDuel because we're not expecting him to go deep into the game. I don't think he's a great FanDuel play. you can see that like he's not terrible still because like nobody on the slate is great, but I do think he's a much better DraftKings play than FanDuel because one, FanDuel, you need guys to get the quality start, get the win. That's more difficult for Holmes since we don't expect him to go that deep into the game. But also you're only rostering the one pitcher. So, on DraftKings, you're rostering two. You have to find two pitchers on this slate that are going to do well, which good luck. It's just, pushes Grant Holmes up even more, where with that SP2 spot, you can say, look, I'm just not going to spend money at this position. This position sucks today. I'm going to go cheap. He's, good enough play. And then I'm going to spend on bats. On FanDuel, you don't have to deal with getting that second pitcher. So not saying he's horrible or anything on FanDuel, but I wouldn't expect his ownership to be very high, and I don't think that it should be. On the Philadelphia side, I am not getting to their bats much. I think that they are similar to Tampa Bay and the Angels and the Red Sox in that you can look to them for negative correlation. Holmes is getting, I think I said like 24% ownership. He has been good in his limited time as a starter in the majors, made those 7 starts last year and looked good. He was solid in the minors, mostly as a reliever. He projects to be fine, pretty solid in the majors, looking at some of the publicly available projections on Fangraphs, FIP ranging from like 3.8 to low 4s, so it does look good there. But it is a quality Philadelphia offense. Certainly not a spot where I'm looking at this and saying like, oh man, I'd be shocked if Philadelphia has a good game against Grant Holmes. So that's not the approach I'm taking, but obviously if you want to get to Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Alec Baum, JT Realmuto, like if you want to load up on these guys against a popular, unproven, we can put it that way, major league pitcher, go for it. It's not what I'm doing, at least right now, but it's not like it's a super low probability approach or anything like that. Minnesota taking on the Royals in Kansas City, about an 8.5 total in this game. Seth Lugo facing off against Joe Ryan. So this is kind of a weird one where you have two good pitchers overall. You have a park that is not good at all for getting strikeouts. You have a Kansas City offense that is solid. You have a Minnesota offense that can be solid. We've seen, some big pitcher performances against them recently, including Cole Reagans last night. But it's just kind of a spot where I think a lot of stuff cancels out, but you're getting 20 to 25% ownership coming into both of Lugo and Ryan because they are two of the more talented pitchers on the slate. Ryan's 27.2% strikeout percentage is second only to Kikuchi on this slate. 3.5 xFIP is good. Seth Lugo doesn't get the same number of strikeouts, only a 21% K percentage, but a 3.87 xFIP is good. 6% walk percentage is good. You can see we have both guys projected for basically five and a half innings, give or take. 23 total batters faced, give or take. Seth Lugo is $1,400 less expensive. I'm below the field on both of these guys. I just have more Gossman. I have, more Kikuchi, more Pepio, more Holmes. I'm not going to talk anybody off of getting to them. The big thing I think that is pulling them down a little bit is the park. It's just such a difficult park to get strikeouts in. And, this is something that I touch on whenever I talk about this park, really, because it has a reputation that is just, I think, so different from reality. It's a difficult place to hit home runs. And so it gets this reputation as being a tough place to score runs and a pitcher-friendly park. And it's really not. It's a good place to score runs. The batter's eye in center field is noteworthy for being extremely clean. Hitters have an easy time, relatively easy time picking up the ball out of pitchers' hands. That's what you see drive down strikeout percentage generally. People have asked in the past, like, how does one park have a lower strikeout park factor? That's a big reason is what in center field is the ball coming out of when the pitcher throws it. In Kansas City, it's just coming off of a giant black or dark green, whatever color it is, background, and it's easier to pick up. You also have a little bit of extra foul territory. You can drive down strikeout percentage as well because that pitch you foul off with 2 strikes ends up getting caught instead of going into the stands. So it is a park that downplays strikeouts despite what Cole Reagans does. So yeah, like Seth Lugo's good. Joe Ryan's good. If you click on him, great. I don't have any like, holy shit, you shouldn't do that. That's a dumb play takes. They're not what I'm prioritizing right now. I don't love the matchups. Their projections don't look great for us. I think we're probably a little bit lower than industry. I haven't actually double checked that, but just guessing based on ownership and guessing and based on what I'm looking at. But again, they're talented. If you want to play them, great. probably not the route that I'm going to go. Offensively, I am actually getting to this game, which I don't love, but it does make sense in the context of just the set of lineups I'm playing. Like if I'm not going to be getting to too much of the 20 to 25% owned pitchers, I may as well be taking some shots against them and hoping that these offenses come through, even though it's not super likely. Bobby Witt would be my highest owned guy here at 19%. He's getting 10% ownership. It goes without saying that getting to Bobby Witt at low ownership on a 5-game slate, I don't really care who he's facing, is not a bad idea. Willie Castro as a value play, 3,800, second base, third base, hitting second is showing up for me about 18%. Fields at about 10 to 11%. Ty France, Carlos Correa, Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach, all in that like 10 to 15% range. India, Pasquantino, a little bit behind that. So I'm like around 2x the field on most of the hitters in this game, who all range from like 5 to 10% owned. I don't have any problem with that. My night isn't revolving around one of these teams going off, but if one of them does, I'm putting myself in a pretty advantageous position through a combination of not having a lot of the pitching, so getting negative correlation against them, and then also just low raw ownership. Looking at the splits that these guys have going back to last year, 132 expected ISO to lefties for Lugo, 165 to righties. He is somebody that I would expect to give up a little bit more power to righties than lefties, just because of his pitch mix. He has a very good high spin curveball, always has, going back to his time with the Mets. Generally, not always, but generally, a curveball is a pitch that plays better to opposite-handed hitters. Slider is a breaking ball that plays better to same-handed hitters. So you have that curveball that he throws a lot to lefties. To righties, he relies heavily on a sinker, which isn't a great strikeout pitch. It is a pitch that generally is going to be hit on the ground, but it's also not a very forgiving pitch. If you leave it up in the middle of the plate to a same-handed hitter, they are going to do damage. So generally, he locates well. He doesn't give up a ton of power, but he is somebody that I expect, to maintain those reverse splits. So if you are singling somebody out or, hesitant to go to like a Carlos Correa or a Ty France, I wouldn't be. That's not to say that you can't play like Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach. They're still fine. And it's not a great spot for the righties either. But I did want to just single out that Lugo does give up a little bit more power to those righties. On the other side, Joe Ryan, 23% strikeout percentage to lefties last year, 30.5% to righties. Pretty similar power numbers, at least expected power numbers to both sides. 157 expected ISO to lefties, 142 to righties. So I don't think you're really singling anybody out from a split standpoint. It's more so like your general, this dude that throws right-handed is not as good against lefties as righties. That's what you get from most guys, in baseball. That being said, Bobby Witt would still be my favorite guy to get to here just because he is Bobby Witt. But, Pasquantino, kind of interesting. I'm like 2x the field on him. Tampa Bay's lineup is gross. Talked about it, but in case you missed it, they are running out kind of their right-handed heavy facing a left-handed starter lineup, which means that when you get into the bullpen, that lineup is probably going to change if the game is relatively competitive. Larry said on smaller slates, do you seem to go more 5-man over 4-man stacks, or do you not even think about it? I don't think about it. Like whatever comes out of my process, I play. I've never actually gone back to look to see what I'd be prioritizing with the set of lineups. If I were playing 150 right now with the set of lineups I have, my highest owned stack type would be 5-2, then it would be 5-3, then it would be 4-3, then it would be 4-2-2, then it would be 4-4, then it would be 5x. But I've never actually gone back to look at it. I don't really have a lean, I don't think, like off the top of my head of what I would expect or what I would want it to be. I think it's generally going to be slate dependent, like so many things. On large field tournaments, what's a way to go for DraftKings, if I might add? Everything I'm talking about on this show is my current player exposures for large field tournaments on DraftKings. So, take whatever you want from it. But, yeah. Wrapping this one up, Milwaukee taking on Colorado. We still do not have a Milwaukee lineup, I don't think. Double checking that. Does not look like we've gotten it. So still flying dark on who is going to be in the lineup for the Brewers. Whoever is in the lineup for the Brewers, they are going to be the highest projected offense. They probably will be getting the most ownership. They should be getting the most ownership. They have like a 6-run total on a slate where nobody else is above 5. Senzatella, not a horrible pitcher, I guess, as far as like limiting power and production, especially given that he does pitch his home games in Coors Field. But he does not get strikeouts. And this is not a park where you want to allow opposing offenses to put the ball in play, because batting average on balls in play in this park just skyrockets. 7.5% strikeout percentage in a limited sample last year against lefties, 10% overall. You have to go back to 2022 to get any sort of decent sample on Senzatella because of injury. But even going back to 2022, 13.3% strikeout percentage against lefties, 11.6% against righties, 187 expected ISO to righties, 161 to lefties. Again, the power numbers aren't horrible. They're not great or anything. But you're just going to allow so many balls in play in Coors Field. That's going to look good. Contreras projected for 28% ownership. Chourio projected for 28% ownership. Turang projected for 26%. Hoskins projected for 25%. Yelich at 22%. And then I think every other Brewer bat between like 10 and 20%. One difference, or one thing that screwed up my exposures here, is that we have, I think, Bauer's projected in, and I built my lineups in SaberSim, which has Hoskins, so it screwed that up. But point being, this team's going to be very, very popular. I do think I will get to them probably around the field, if not a little bit lower. That's kind of what it seems looking at the exposures I am getting. I have 30% Chourio. I have 22% Turang, 19% Contreras, 18% Mitchell, 18% Yelich, like 10 to 15% of everybody beyond that. So I'm not really taking a big stand one way or the other on Milwaukee. They're obviously a good team to get to. As far as 5-mans go, they would be my highest owned 5-man. They're my second highest owned behind Colorado overall stack, 2 through 5-man. But they're just an offense that you're going to want to get to. They obviously project really well. But kind of like I was talking about with Atlanta, but to an even bigger extent, you are going to need to find ways to be different if you're playing 5-man Milwaukee stacks, because not only is every individual player going to be 10 to 30% owned, but they're going to be owned together a lot too. So you're going to really need to maximize those other lineup spots, finding ways to be contrarian, finding ways to be different. And to kind of explicitly answer Don's question, not from like a these are the plays standpoint, but from a strategy standpoint, this is the type of team where thinking about not only the raw ownership for the rest of your lineup, but ways to negatively correlate with the field can be really strong, can be really important, because you're taking on, if you're 5-man stacking Milwaukee, you're taking on so much of that ownership. And then your teams are going to look so similar to other teams that if you just go the route of like, all right, I have these 5 hitters, they project well. Now, how can I fill out the rest of my lineup so that it also projects really well? Even if you're going to like, 10% owned guys or 5% owned guys, if it's just the 5 to 10% owned guys that project the best, you're going to be overlapping so much with other people that built lineups. Whereas if you put a little bit extra priority on like not only finding a 5 to 10% guy that projects relatively well, but the 5 to 10% guy that projects relatively well and is facing 25% owned Kevin Gossman, and then pairing him with the 5 to 10% owned guy that projects relatively well and is facing Yusei Kikuchi, Yandy Diaz plus Jarren Duran or something like that, is just going to give you a little bit more differentiation than if you say, I don't know, I'm going to 5-man stack Milwaukee and then I'm going to play whatever Braves fit, or, 1 or 2 of the Braves against Taijuan Walker, because those Braves, they're going to be relatively popular themselves. But then like, even if that Brave hitter that you play does do well, it's not doing anything extra because nobody's playing Taijuan Walker. So, using Phillies maybe with the Brewers to get against the Grant Holmes ownership makes sense. So this is the type of team where I would care a little bit more about pairing them with negatively correlated plays. If you are Einsteinium and you really want to play Taijuan Walker, Milwaukee, I would say, is a great team to do it with, because you're negatively correlating against the popular Atlanta stacks. You're getting a sub 5% owned pitcher himself in Taijuan Walker. So if he does go out there and throw a gem, you're kind of by yourself at the top of tournaments. So I think this is one of those stacks where you can put a little bit more thought into what you're doing. Like if you're hand building, obviously, if you're running an automated process or a Sims-based process or whatever, you don't actually have to think through any of this. It's just going to happen. But if you are hand building or, manually selecting lineups, a team like Milwaukee, I think you do want to put a little bit more thought into how the rest of your lineup looks. Whereas if like your primary stack is Boston, you don't have to do it as much outside of the obvious, like, I probably don't want the highest owned team I can possibly play. But you don't have to think you don't have to be as strategic beyond just having that Boston stack as you do, I think, with a team like Milwaukee. On the other side for Colorado, I am getting to a lot of them. They are like 10 to 15% owned across the board. I am quite a bit higher. And I am fine with that, just given that it is a 5-game slate. They are still in cores. They do have, they're tied with Atlanta for the second highest implied run total on the slate behind Milwaukee. So like that's good as well. I had forgotten to pull the projections up on the screen here. But you can see going back to Milwaukee too, plenty of stolen base upside here. Jackson Chourio projects for a very good stolen base number. So does Bryce Turang. Yelich will run. Garrett Mitchell will run. So you have stolen base upside, but also another benefit to having a fast team when they're playing in Coors Field is that they can take advantage of that extra outfield space as well. This is a team that they're just going to leg out doubles on singles. They're going to turn doubles into triples. They're going to take advantage of this massive outfield when balls fall in play, even if they aren't stealing bases, which they will if they get the opportunity as well. So that's another reason to like Milwaukee here. And the pricing, while they are relatively expensive at the top, this is not a team that is priced for Coors Field tonight. Like you just should not have half the lineup below $5,000. The only hitter above 5,700 is Chourio at 6K. Like it's way too easy to get to this team, especially on this slate where you don't have to prioritize paying for like $10,000 pitchers either. Very, very easy to get to them. So that's another thing that's going to make that overlap really big too. Like you're just gonna be able to build lineups if you want to, where you have the best projected pitching with like Kikuchi and whoever else, whoever your SP2 of choice is, plus Brewers, plus some pretty solid one-offs. Like you're just gonna need a lot of teams like that. So you really do need to be careful in large field tournaments specifically with what you're pairing with these Milwaukee stacks. On the Colorado side, though, I am getting to them at a little bit higher rate. Hunter Goodman showing up a ton for me. Batting fifth, 3,900, 16% ownership. I'm a little over 2x that right now at 38%. We have a pretty solid projection on him for the price. It helps that he's catcher eligible as well. That's obviously a tougher position to fill. Has a very high home run projection for us, which is nice. So like all of that, Tyler Alexander going for Milwaukee, 217 expected ISO allowed to right-handed hitters since the start of last season. So that is, good for Goodman. Brenton Doyle showing up 31% of the time for me, 14% projected ownership. So 2x the field on him as well. Pretty high home run mark there as well. We saw him really take a step up last season, and he's somebody that I haven't really looked, but you may see kind of be going under projected in general across the industry because he made such a massive jump last year, like much bigger than projection models expected. And obviously he could just regress to being average, but there was a lot of talk about like how much work, the big changes he made that went into what he was doing. And he really, really was good last year. So he is somebody that, I think if models are not using the most at the newest data that you're getting from baseball, that can kind of give you more insight into like if changes are good, if they're likely to be sustainable, all that kind of stuff. They're going to be slower to adjust. They're going to be relying more on what he had done prior to last year. So it is a spot where I think I wouldn't be surprised if I'm just kind of like over on Brenton Doyle for a lot of the season, because he's going to get some ownership playing for the Rockies, but probably not as much as he should batting leadoff against Tyler Alexander in Coors Field at only 5K. Has massive stolen base upside as well. I think he looks really good. And then I'm perfectly fine getting to whatever else from this lineup. You do have a high pinch hit chance on Bouchard here. I am still over the field, which sucks, but he's 3K hitting second in Coors. It's very likely he is not going to finish the game, but he's so cheap and relatively low owned that he is still showing up for me. But I did want to highlight that one, that, this is another spot where you have the left-handed starter for Milwaukee. You have the right-handed heavy lineup for Colorado. So somebody like Sean Bouchard does have a lot of pinch hit risk. Brenton Doyle doesn't. Goodman doesn't. Tovar doesn't. The lefties obviously don't. Zach Veen, Veen could get pinch hit for, but it's not a lefty-righty thing so much as he is brand new to the major leagues and we don't know what they'll do in like a tight situation. But like Kyle Farmer has pinch hit risk. Chris Bryant doesn't. Michael Toglia doesn't. Ryan McMahon doesn't. So the biggest pinch hit risk guys I think are Bouchard for sure, and then to a lesser extent Farmer and Veen. But these main guys here that I was getting to, Goodman and Doyle, don't really have it, even though they're right-handed. So I like that quite a bit as well. So to recap, if the slate started right now, highest owned stacks for me would be Colorado, Milwaukee, Boston 1 through 3, followed by Minnesota and Atlanta. Top 5 mans for me would be Milwaukee, Boston, Colorado, followed by Minnesota and Atlanta. Top pitching for me, if the slate started right now, would be Yusei Kikuchi, Kevin Gossman, Ryan Pepio, Grant Holmes as the priorities. Then a pretty big drop off and getting to like some Lugo, some Alexander, some Ryan. I don't really have much Walker or Tanner Houck. So I'm pretty concentrated at the moment, at least on those top 4 with Kikuchi, Gossman, Pepio, and Holmes, which based on our projections doesn't really surprise me. You kind of just have that drop off here, both in terms of point per dollar projection, but also raw point projection. So it looks like a pretty interesting slate for only 5 games. There are at least some interesting spots to get to. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Don't forget you can use these projections for yourself. Sign up using the link in the description below. Really excited that we have these. Looking forward to playing this season with them. It's really nice to be involved in the projection process, have some say into the inputs to go into them, and then obviously be working with guys like Utica that have had massive say into what is going into these. So looking forward to using these. They just from looking at them reflect a lot of the things that like in the past I would be manually changing to industry projections. So really excited for these. Happy to walk through them. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Don't forget the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. And I will, I think, be back here hopefully tomorrow morning. Depends on how many games there are and exactly what time I can do the show. If not, definitely on Friday. I will see you one of those 2 days. Thanks again for checking out the show.